Hi, everybody. This is Tracy Stuckrath with Thrive Meetings and Events and the Eating in a Meeting livecast and podcast. Thank you for joining us. At Eating in a Meeting, we talk about all things food and beverage, dietary restrictions, farming, sustainability, and everything in between and around that. In today's episode, I am so excited to have fellow La Dame, Fran Costigan. She's a pastry chef out of Philadelphia. She's a cookbook author and consultant on vegan baking, director of the Vegan Baking and Pastry at Ruby Culinary School, which is an online culinary school. And then she's also an advisory board member of the Coalition for Healthy Food School, which is, oh my gosh, so important these days with school food. Yes. Well, Fran, thank you for joining me on the show. I'm excited to chat with you.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Tracy. I'm really excited to be here. This topic is so important and growing exponentially. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out in the universe.
Yeah.
This is not really something that's difficult to eat, for everyone to eat safely.
Right.
But there's a lot of noise. So anytime I have a chance to speak with someone about what this really means, because it's so important, it can be annoying for some people or life-threatening for others.
Yeah. Oh, very much so. Yeah. When I give presentations and I talk about veganism, I actually do three different things. I said, you've got the Bill Clintons of the world who went vegan because of his heart attack, right? It was medically suggested that he go on a vegan diet. And then Bill Gates, who went vegan for environmental reasons. And then other Natalie Portman and other, Joaquin Phoenix, for animal rights activisms. And so thinking about it in different ways, but it doesn't matter which avenue that you take for choosing to go vegan. We have to respect that need and that want to do so.
Absolutely. I agree. I mean, there are the people who are ethical vegans for the animals, and that can really go far, right? To sugar people use, or the clothing, the materials for the clothing that they wear, and so on. I became a vegan over 25 years ago. Now, I didn't identify that way because I probably didn't know the word. I didn't know any vegans, so more than likely I was macrobiotic, which was around at the time. And what happened for me was I had gone to culinary school, traditional culinary school, New York Women. No, that's an organization I belong to, New York Restaurant School. Later in life, later than most people go. I was an adult. I had worked as a meeting planner, as a matter of fact. And I just found whenever I traveled, all I was thinking about was food. I wanted to know how to do it. So my family, had kids at home in school, said, go do it. And I loved every bit of it. Then when I graduated, I got a job as a pastry chef in a shop on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And I was charged with making all the pastries. And I just loved this work. It was my dream job. But what happened for me was I had stomach aches, really, dietary upsets my entire life. I mean, I remember them as a little child. My stomach hurt so much. My mother gave me ice cream for breakfast, if you can believe it, because I'm sure back in the day, and I'm going way back in the day, I have 4 grandchildren now, the pediatrician probably said, that kid has to drink milk. And I couldn't. I literally couldn't swallow it. So my mother's solution was ice cream for breakfast. Not great. Anyway, I had to leave my dream job. And I happened to pick up a book. Now, I'm a New Yorker, right? I'm in New York. I picked up a book, Food and Healing by Dr. Anne-Marie Colbin. And to my surprise, there was a school called the Natural Gourmet Institute in New York that I didn't know of. So maybe this business of when the teacher is ready, when the student is ready, the teacher shows up. I called the school, and at the time, Dr. Colbin was offering I think it was a 3-month food and healing course. I read the book. I signed up for the course, but as soon as I read the book, I was struck by her idea that what we eat could affect how we feel.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I never liked milk. I'm going to give up dairy. And without thinking about it, I gave up all animal foods. And
Wow.
I'm telling you, I don't suggest that just jumping into things unless you have a reason, you are diagnosed with an allergy, is the best way to do things. And I am not the food police, but for me, it was a miracle. My allergies went away. I mean, the stomach aches went away. The end, and have never returned.
Wow.
Went away. My energy level stabilized. My weight stabilized. And because I was interested in food, I never saw this as deprivation. I'm like, look at all these foods that I haven't been eating. There's so much wonderful food in the plant world. So I was very excited. I didn't see it as deprivation, except for a little while, I became a member of what I call the dreaded food police. And I was like, all desserts are evil, sugar, that can't be part of a healthy diet. And don't you know it, my 14-year-old son said, you can't put a candle in a sweet potato and tell me that's my birthday cake. Story. So I started looking at what was available in the marketplace for vegan desserts and treats and what was available in cookbooks. I was used to formulas. I was used to technique. And there was nothing, unless you liked something that was brown or dry and gummy. And the recipes were crazy. Use 1 cup of maple sugar or date sugar or 1 cup of barley malt or whatever. Now, again, going back over 25 years ago, I didn't have oat milk and almond milk. We were almost mixing the soy milk powder into the water.
Wow.
My first plant-based job as a pastry chef, there was a chocolate cake on the menu, and I was given stick hydrogenated margarine, which had a terrible smell, and hydrogenation is so bad for us. So I went into, I said, I can do better than this. I know I can do better. And I really made a test kitchen, and I had to learn the taste of the different sweeteners and the products that were available, because back then there was no nice vegan butter. There were no commercial replacers, certainly not the miracle of aquafaba. Most of my recipes use a liquid fat. I like a mild tasting extra virgin olive oil, unless I'm used to making an Italian cake where I wanted a punch of a heavy green olive oil. I use baking powder, baking soda, and vinegar. That was, the basis of the accidentally vegan cakes during the Depression. But
wow.
there's no one size fits all, but I took the technique that I learned, I didn't throw it out the window, and took it over to the vegan dessert side.
And then you've become now the queen of vegan desserts. That's so amazing. You've got what, 2 cookbooks out, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
I do. The first book is called, and there are differences in the books because, we keep learning. The first book is called More Great Good Dairy-Free Desserts Naturally. Very long title, which I didn't pick. And I use quality ingredients. I wasn't used to using junk in the traditional world. So I give a lot of information. And my more recent book is called Vegan Chocolate, Unapologetically Luscious and Decadent Dairy-Free Desserts. And that book has there is a German edition, a French edition, and an Italian edition because evidently everyone likes chocolate. And I wrote that because I saw a hole in the market. I love cookbooks. I bet you do too, for inspiration. And I would see the chocolate books in particular were gorgeous, just these beautiful books with fabulous photographs and recipes that sounded great that I couldn't eat. Yeah. I want to make things I can eat. And I said, why can't there be a vegan book that is so beautiful? And this book is really beautiful. I didn't especially want vegan title, but the publisher did. Sign of the times.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Now, as a former meeting planner, and when I go to an event and I'm looking for gluten-free or dairy, gluten-free, dairy-free desserts, they're very few and far between. And it's, you get that lovely bowl of fruit. And I mean, rather than give me a bowl of blueberries, because I'm not a melon fan, but you get, pineapple and melon and all that. That's what your dessert is, which is just a shame. And actually on a podcast or episode I was on a little while ago this morning, the standard plate for some vegetarians or vegans is roasted carrots, for their entree. And then she gets a bowl of, fruit, which is just mind-boggling to me. It is very, very terrible. So in a couple of things with what I just said, and then with what you said, is aquafaba and then sweeteners and sugars. I want to learn a little bit about that, but I also want, what can planners do, or what is a great, easy vegan dessert that planners can request from their hotel partners?
Right. That's an important question. What you just said is it makes my it's like scratching nails on a chalkboard or something. I don't want a plate of roasted vegetables, and I don't put them over pasta or steamed vegetables.
Yes.
And I happen to love brown rice, but I don't want that if I'm out and other people around me are having really beautiful dishes. And I certainly don't want a fruit salad. Now, I want to differentiate. There is some confusion around what is a vegan dessert and what is not a vegan dessert. So a vegan dessert means vegan cuisine, but we're talking about desserts, means there is no animal product whatsoever to make this dessert. So that goes beyond dairy. There's no milk, there's no butter, there's no cream, heavy cream, there's no sour cream, there's no cheese. Most vegans avoid honey as well. I believe that without bees, we have no food. So I temper that. I saw a film called Queen of the Sun, which I really recommend, and talks about these beekeepers all over the world, not the commercial honey, because those bees come in from New Zealand. Can you believe it? To California.
Wow.
And then are awakened with sugar syrup. So that's not cool. But honey is also congesting and can be congesting energetically, and shouldn't be given to young children because there's a risk of botulism. So that is all a vegan dessert is. People would say to me, what do you use for chocolate? And I go like, chocolate, cocoa powder. You have to read labels. Yes. Everybody here, that is the number one most important truth. Okay. But a vegan dessert can be gluten-free, but it is not necessarily gluten-free. There are a lot of gluten-free desserts that are made with eggs. There are a lot, so it can be raw, but not necessarily raw. So I differentiate between those two. Now, I can do vegan and gluten-free. That to make something that is absolutely delicious. I don't want to hear that was good for what it is. Look good for your age, whatever. No, has to be fabulous. And that said, I've had conventional desserts that weren't very good. So, so it's in the hand of the person who's making this dessert to make something great. For a meeting planner who may not have experience with vegan desserts and gluten-free desserts, and the idea is to have everyone to be able to eat together, so you don't have to go running around and make a whole bunch of different options. I mean, I never saw this as exclusionary. I see it as everyone can eat together, because these vegan desserts take care of your dairy allergies, your egg allergies, lactose intolerant, a lot of that. But so many people today are wheat sensitive or celiac as well, and the egg thing. So I say, find one baked recipe that works and make it over and over again with different sauces, different fruit sauces. If you're in a situation for your meeting where and again, I want to say about gluten-free, where I think about the celiacs. So you can't just go over to a part of your kitchen and say, well, I'm going to take out the Bob's Red Mill all-purpose 1-to-1 baking flour, which is my favorite of all the gluten-free flours, because cross-contamination matters. So unless you have a dedicated kitchen, make a fruit dessert, but not raw. A beautiful baked apple stuffed with dates, pumpkin, all kinds of things. A
good.
lovely real sorbet can be, gluten-free and vegan as well. Poached pear with a chocolate sauce. And we eat with our eyes, so present this beautifully. Learn a recipe, find a space that is certified gluten-free, and label things so people know, and train your staff so they know.
Right. Now, what would kind of going back to the sugar, and I just have these, sometimes I think it would be harder to eat vegan than it would be to eat gluten-free because of some of the processes that we make food. Like, so for sugar, I've heard that you have to get certified vegan sugar. And I've also heard food colorings come from, not fun places.
Bug. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really good question. Yeah, that's a really good question, because there is confusion around sugar. So cane sugar, that we get in the supermarket, that white sugar, is really, I was taught that this is the only edible food, right? Because you can have an organic food that is poison,
right?
The way things grow, that doesn't have to be digested. Digestion starts in the mouth with the saliva, but because it is 99.7 or 8% pure, that's been so highly refined that it's worse than empty calories, actually, because it just hits your pancreas, goes crazy, and it takes care of your B vitamins for the day or the week or whatever. So cane sugar is used by vegans, but any cane sugar that is labeled organic or labeled vegan means that it hasn't gone through a final processing. And that processing, two processings, the one that vegans worry about is bone char and bleaching. So without those processes, the vegan sugars, the organic sugars, and often the fair trade sugars as well, and they all may be labeled as one, is safe. Now, they range in color from very, very, very pale blonde to a little bit darker. The sugar crystals are very fine to a little less fine, but the crystal is always larger than a white sugar crystal. And I'm not telling people to eat, sugar for the vitamins and minerals that are left, but this sugar, because it hasn't been fully refined through the bone char, does retain some of the fiber and some of the molasses, which adds a layer of flavor. And you're finding now, I know for sure, that a lot of the top chefs in traditional restaurants are using these, I don't call them unrefined sugars, I'm a truth teller, but these less refined sugars, calling them flavor sugars. So I use organic cane, which is a 1-to-1 swap to white sugar. It's suitable for vegans. I use a product, but that has had most of the molasses pulled out of it. The second product that's also made from cane, is most easily found under the brand name Sucanat, which stands for Sugarcane Natural. It's a company, Wholesome Sweeteners, which is a very reliable company. And that all of the molasses is retained. So I use that for a brown sugar replacement. Now, brown sugar in the marketplace is just white sugar that's been painted. All the molasses is pulled out and then it's painted on. So it's not a whole food. It's still white sugar. Beet sugar was used for a long time by vegans because that doesn't undergo the same bone char filtering.
Right.
But beets are pretty much 100% a genetically modified crop. So I shy away from that.
Okay.
I learned that in Paris when I was doing an event. They were like, "Oh, we don't use that." No,
Wow.
And then the other, I like liquid sweeteners. I like pure maple syrup, the dark maple syrup. They all have different characteristics. So it's not a 1-to-1 swap. Rice syrup.
Right.
My new favorite is date syrup, which is known in the Middle East as Silan.
Okay.
S-I-L-A-N. And to me, it's a milder tasting molasses. You have to be careful about molasses because unless you buy organic molasses, molasses is a byproduct of sugar refining. So if you're buying molasses that comes from non-organic sugar cane, it's a chemical soup. And I think a lot of us have allergies to chemicals that are used in processing as well. Yeah.
So what, I meant to bring up aquafaba. I meant to bring up a can of chickpeas. So you mentioned on your Instagram chat the other day, you used aquafaba for something. And for all of those who don't know what it is, as Veg News named it, the invention of the year in 2015, but it's the liquid from the chickpea can.
That's right. It was named aquafaba.
It was the name aquafaba that became the
right. Well, it was discovered by a Frenchman named Gus Wobot, and now nobody 100% understands how this works. And I'm saying when you start seeing a vegan ingredient in Cook Illustrated, Food and Wine, Martha Stewart, you name it, it's a thing. So what it is the liquid from cooked beans. The most commonly used, most reliable, I think, is the liquid from chickpeas. But other beans will work. I had a student in my Essential Vegan Desserts course who wanted a light purplish glow to her aquafaba meringue and used a mixture of black bean and a white bean, and she got that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I was seeing these recipes which essentially said, take a can of chickpeas, and I like to eat chickpeas, so that's cool with me. I like them roasted. I like hummus, everything. Drain the liquid, put it in your stand mixer or use a hand mixer. Add some cream of tartar or vinegar. This is exactly how you would make meringue from egg whites.
Okay.
And start whipping with the whisk. And once it becomes opaque, start adding superfine sugar, tablespoon at a time. Now, you have to use superfine sugar. I grind my vegan sugar quite a quantity at a time in a high-speed blender
Mm-hmm.
to make my own superfine sugar. I'm not talking about confectioner sugar with the starch in it. And so one day I said, okay, I'll give that a try. But I thought this is too imprecise because my pastry chef brain said every can of chickpeas is not going to be the same amount of liquid. You get about 2/3 of a cup on average, but I've had some with less and some with more. And I've also found a way to do it with cooked, chickpea liquid that I've cooked from dried chickpeas. So I said, the first thing I'm going to do is standardize this. And I take notice of what I get. We're talking about a can here now, about 2/3 of a cup, and I reduce it to a half a cup. So I reduce the liquid by about 1/3. Then you chill it. Sounds like a lot of work, but I do a whole bunch at one time, and you keep it in your freezer until you need it. So now my half cup, right? Put it in my KitchenAid mixer. I put in the cream of tartar. I'm going, I can't believe this. It's meringue.
It is. I've done so much amazing. Yeah.
And there's no taste. When you do this right, there is absolutely no taste of the bean. So I have done this hundreds of times. And I'll tell you, I told you my grandmother, I have had my grandchildren do it. I mean, there's nothing to it. You take this chilled, reduced chickpea liquid and you beat it like meringue. But unlike egg white meringue, you can taste it without worrying about salmonella. But even better, well, I mean, I don't want anyone to have salmonella, but I've been so out of the egg world. You can't over whip it. You just over whip it. So my students are now making baked Alaska. Can you imagine? S'mores, because if you add you can add a little bit of a vegetable gum and make it taste a little bit more marshmallowy. And, everybody loves the torching thing. I've made pavlovas. I've made meringue cookies. I've taken the leftover bits that I keep in the freezer and made Eton mess. This is a great dessert to serve at a meeting because you've got the shards of aquafaba meringue that you can, when I'm doing it, because I add the sugar in a tablespoon at a time and beat for a minute or two, and then beat for 10 minutes. So I can walk away from this. I walk away and do something else. So this can get made. Then you've got a sauce and you've got, cream and lots of fruit. I mean, my secret to, it's amazing. It's amazing. Everyone has to know how to make this. I hold up that with it and people go crazy.
So you can turn that in. So I've just made them into cookies. So I can just actually take that and use it as a replacement for cream.
It depends what kind of cream you're doing. I do different things for cream, but the liquid will come out of it after a while. So for example, if you're making a marshmallow, if you're using it to replace like a marshmallow fluff, for example, on a s'more or a baked Alaska, you can just pipe it or spoon it and store that in the freezer and it won't degrade. So that's fine. I have added a very stiff chocolate ganache, and that is really something. I want to go back to meetings and say, everybody, every chef who's out there can learn to make a vegan truffle by making essentially a 2-ingredient ganache if you don't add the vanilla extract or salt in the mix. And those stay in the freezer for months, and pull them out and put them on a plate for your vegan and gluten-free eaters. So, there you go. But I've taken ganache and tempered it with a little bit of the wicked aquafaba, and it makes a French chocolate mousse that's unbelievable.
Okay, my God, there are so many new options with just aquafaba.
That's right. Before aquafaba, and I'll tell you, it hit right after vegan chocolate came out. And that's the thing about cookbooks is, they're on
Yeah.
There's always something new, but that doesn't mean good.
Right. Yeah.
Necessarily, because sometimes people are just throwing things against a wall to see what will happen. But people were, you may know the name Miyoko Shinner of
Yes.
Miyoko's Creamery. Her butter is very good. Her cheeses are very good. She was using flax gel. When you boil up flax seeds and strain them, you get this like glop that we would prefer to use gel. And it whips like aquafaba. It's not quite as reliable and it's messier to make. So if you're making it from home, if you're cooking homemade chickpeas in your Instant Pot or on your stove, you don't want any garlic in there if you're going to be using the liquid for aquafaba.
Right.
I cook it with a piece of kombu seaweed, which mineralizes, a good way to cook beans, but it also helps the aquafaba. And then I reduce that more till it's a little bit more viscous. If you go too far, you can add some water in, but it just becomes more viscous. It's amazing. And it can be used as an egg replacer too, to some degree, unwhipped a little bit.
Wow. So LA just posted that she's like, I'm ready for a taste test. So I was like, yes, we need to have you back to do a cooking demo or class for the Eating at a Meeting community.
Love to. I do, some of my desserts in the book are very simple. I have ice creams. I have simple to put together cakes. I have a whole chapter on chocolate truffles. And then I have what I call showstoppers. But everything, I've got Fran's rules. I figure I'm writing it. I can call it Fran's rules. And there are steps to how you do things. But my really favorite recipes based on what I hear from people is my original cake, the chocolate cake to live for. You mentioned Bill Clinton changing his diet for his heart. There was Dr. Esselstyn who helped him out. Dr. Esselstyn wrote the book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, and his son, Rip Esselstyn, the Engine 2, Rip Esselstyn asked me to make that cake for his wedding. So I have a standard version of it. I have a no oil added version of it for the Bill Clintons, the whole food plant-based no oil people. I have a gluten-free version as well. Because the idea, again, is for everyone to eat together. So if you can, and maybe you don't have, I always have a cake and a layer in my freezer and ganache, but you can, I've got this almost instant chocolate pudding. I don't know anyone who doesn't like warm chocolate pudding. It goes together so quickly. You can use the sugar you want. You can use this organic cane sugar, or some people like coconut sugar, right, which is said to be sustainable. And it adds a little bit of a caramel taste, but you don't really notice it in it's nice in the chocolate pudding. I grind it because it tends to be gritty. Yep. And it goes together so fast. So you can serve chocolate pudding to your guests at a meeting in pretty little cups with an edible flower on top, or a chocolate truffle that's been in the chill box.
Oh my God, we need to take you to every single one of our meetings and make our desserts for us.
In terms of the plant milk to make the ganache is typically heavy cream and chocolate in varying proportions. And sometimes butter's added and sometimes other things, natural flavors, which we know we want to avoid. That's a slippery slope. But I make a couple of assumptions. I am not soy allergic. I don't have allergies except for the lactose. And so, but I want everyone to enjoy what I make. So I assume soy avoiders and I assume nut allergic. I make my desserts with oat milk for the most part now, because I haven't yet run into anyone who's allergic to oat. If I do, I have a recipe for a truffle that's made with tahini and orange juice. So then there's no,
oh, wow.
And it's fabulous after a Moroccan meal. I mean, it's just good all the time. And almost everything, again, stays in the freezer until you're ready to pop it out. So you have a meeting and I think it's nice when people say ahead, here are my dietary considerations.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But
And that's what I teach. I'm like, planners need to ask and attendees need to communicate their needs in advance so that we can, think about the menu and think about what we're serving them so that you don't get that dreaded bowl of fruit for dessert.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
That bowl of fruit, it's an insult. Whereas, my way of eating a good dessert is to make something that is delicious for everyone, serve a smaller portion and fill the plate out with fruit. Then you're getting, we eat with our eyes. It looks like more. Serve a single layer, a tort, put some crumbs on the top, do whatever, it builds. And then put some fruit on the plate. That's a nice dessert. I even took that ganache once too. I had some left over and I was doing an event and there were raspberries in the dessert I made. So I'm looking at the bowl of ganache. I'm looking at the raspberries. I was a little giddy because I had made a lot. And the little hole in the top of a raspberry.
Yeah.
I filled it with ganache and it was like crazy. So I brought them as a joke. I had enough for a plate and everybody loved them because people who say, oh, I don't eat dessert.
Right.
Much not telling the truth because those are the people who blow, then they eat everything. But you have this little bit of chocolate in a raspberry, or I love medjool dates. They're really healthy. There's lots of fiber. Mm-hmm. Put a nut if you don't have a nut allergy. Stuff it with a nut or some nut paste or this chocolate and dip it. And you have a petit four platter to put out. So now you've got your stuffed dates, your truffle. You can I've taken this ganache. I have a recipe in the book. I mean, it's like a no recipe. I was in Spain and I was served bread and chocolate but not croissant, bread and chocolate. Right. So I take a whole grain baguette, brush it with olive oil and grill it, and then spread it with ganache and sprinkle with a nice flaky sea salt. It's wonderful. There are some nice gluten-free breads and crackers. You can do the same thing. So it looks like you've got all these desserts. That really didn't take a lot of time.
Oh, that's so good. All right. Well, we're at 37 minutes. We could talk about this forever. It's so intriguing to learn how to make all of this stuff. And I'm gonna buy one of your cookbooks because my nephew's coming and he's dairy-free and egg-free and for Thanksgiving. And I actually need to come up with that. Hopefully do you have a vegan pumpkin pie recipe in there?
Certainly do.
Yes. So
I'm probably one of the few people I love squash. I live on squash. I'm not a giant pumpkin pie lover, but my son is, and many of my students and friends are. So yeah, there's a nice pumpkin pie.
Okay, fantastic.
Last night I did an alternate pumpkin pie filling, and I just wanted to see. I baked one off in a ramekin in a water bath, and it was a delicious pudding.
Wow. So, okay. All right. Well, good. So I'm going to post your website. I posted your website and directly to your books. People can find you on Instagram. What is your hashtag for all of them?
Yeah, Good Cakes Fran on Instagram, and they'll find the famous photo of the aquafaba. On Twitter, I'm Good Cakes Fran, and Pinterest as well. On Facebook, I'm Fran Costigan Vegan Pastry Chef. And the links to the Essential Vegan Desserts course are through my website, which is francostigan.com. Now, that is a vegan course. It is not strictly a gluten-free course, but I have had numerous students go through who are gluten-free. We have alternate recipes. There are 1 or 2 recipes that need to be made the way they are. If you can't have wheat flour in your home or workplace, we understand that. But sometimes, you have to learn how to walk before you can run. So you need to see what the intention of a recipe is before you can go off and start changing things up.
That's a good point. Very, very good point. Because I've tried multiple recipes where you just change it and it does not work.
Right. Well, I've had people say to me, oh, this is rare. Most people say, wow, I can make your cake. I mean, they're actually very easy. And there are no odd ingredients either. You know, it's use a quality chocolate. Make sure to read the label, though. There are so many new chocolatiers, bean to bar, fair trade, ethical, which is really important now with Halloween coming up, because slavery is still very shockingly still an issue in the production, child slavery of chocolate. But the big companies are buying up the little guys now. And all of a sudden, you know, I went back to buy a chocolate that I liked, that I knew was safe. And I see milk powder, organic milk powder. So
Wow.
make sure. And if gluten is a serious problem for you, you need to find a chocolate company that has dedicated equipment, because those first few runs, when they're mixing, you're going to get milk powder, you're going to get gluten. So there are a few companies that are certified, gluten-free, certified dairy-free.
Right. Yeah. Well, good. All right. So the final question is, what is your favorite fall dish?
My favorite fall, you're talking about a dessert.
Anything that you love to eat in the fall.
Well, you know, people are always surprised by how much vegetable I eat, but I love greens. I especially love bitter greens, and I think it has to do with the balance of the sweet. So tonight I'll be having and I love Rancho Gordo beans. Tonight I'll be having, because I made this yesterday, you know, I believe in prepping ahead, a white bean escarole and squash stew. And that will be followed by dessert. It's very hard to pick a favorite dessert. Like, you know, who's your favorite kid of your children? But this time of the year, and it's a wonderful dessert for Thanksgiving because you don't need the oven. It's a stovetop, is a fruit slump. So in the summertime, I make this with blueberries. In the winter, you can use any fruit you like. You just follow the formula. And that recipe is available on my website. I will be using cranberries and pears. So what's a slump? Well, I'm fascinated by early American desserts. And there was this conversation around a slump. Is it a slump or is it a grunt? So I did some research, and what you do is you cook up this fruit. You can do it ahead and then rewarm it in the pot when you're ready to start baking, you know, cooking. And you make very simple 1 bowl soft batter, and you just let the batter fall off the spoon over the hot fruit. It's a lot of liquid. Cover the pot really tight. If your lid isn't tight, use some aluminum foil. And what happens is the biscuits are actually steaming into the fruit. So people used to say, are the biscuits slumping into the batter, or are they grunting? Because you can hear.
That's so cool.
Serve that warm, and it's wonderful. If you've made it ahead, it becomes almost more of a buckle because the cake will absorb into the biscuits, which almost turn cake-like. I like that very much. I love apples. I love apples. And I like eating them out of hand, but I also love this time of the year a good baked apple. I think that's a very unsung hero.
Yes.
You know, I'll bake it and stuff it with my favorite nuts or chocolate chips, because I only use chocolate chips in cookies or in something like a baked apple, because that is not a quality chocolate. And, you know, I just love to bake apple with a date caramel sauce. Or cranberry. I love cranberry coulis, which just means cooking your cranberries with a little maple syrup and pushing them through a sieve, and you get this gorgeous crimson color sauce that pops. You know,
You're making me
making you hungry.
Making me hungry, but also making me want to sign up for your class. So
consider it.
We are out of time. But thank you so much for tempting our palates with such delicious plant-based vegan foods and desserts.
Well, thank you, Tracy. It was really fun for me. It was fun to talk to you. And, my goal is I want everyone who is privileged enough to have food available to them. I mean, it should be a right, not a privilege, to eat without fear and to eat joyfully. It's just not rocket science. It just takes learning and a little bit of care.
Thank you, Fran. That's a great way to end the show. This is Fran Costigan, vegan chef, pastry chef out of Philadelphia. And I am Tracy Stuckrath. This was the Eating at a Meeting podcast. You can listen to it live in the Eating at a Meeting Facebook group or on any podcast platform. Just look for Eating at a Meeting. Thank you. Share it with everybody else. And we look forward to seeing you next week for the next episode, live cast. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.